Yo, this is Ben Cubbage from Elevated Trips, and we are experiencing a coronavirus lockdown. After 2 years, China has closed its border to almost all international travelers and has been virtually coronavirus free. They've had maybe 60,000 cases of COVID right in the beginning in 2020, spring 2020, but then they closed their borders, and since that time they've been relatively coronavirus free. Just to give you an idea, our city of 2 million people has only had maybe like 30 cases of coronavirus in the entire 2 years. Of course, we're kind of in Western China where there's not much travel, so we're definitely on the lower end of the spectrum than big cities like Shanghai or Beijing. But for the first time in those 2 years, our city has surpassed those 30 cases, and we now have about 50 coronavirus cases. That's out of 2 million people. So compared to American standards, that's virtually nothing. But for China, 50 coronavirus cases is enough to shut down the whole city. Right now, you can see I'm walking through my Xiaochu. There's almost virtually no one here. The whole Xiaochu is shut down. 8 o'clock tonight, they are not allowing anyone out of the Xiaochu. You can come in, but you can't go out, which means our Xiaochu's or apartment complex is about to go into a 3-day quarantine, basically, and that's because there's 50 cases in our city. So 50 coronavirus cases throughout a city of 2 million people is enough to shut the whole city down. That's every business, every taxi driver. People can't leave their homes at all. And the grocery stores are a madhouse. I'm walking to the grocery store and people are preparing for this 3-day lockdown. And it is nuts. Everyone is buying vegetables. You have to wait probably 30 minutes to an hour in line just to buy a few eggs, a piece of lettuce, whatever. The grocery stores are getting bought out. People are in like a panic mode, like it's an apocalypse. Okay, we're here in the Xiaoshi, right outside my apartment. This is not a big Xiaoshi. If you go to a major market, there's literally, you have to wait in line for 2 to 3 hours. But you can see it's quite busy. Everyone is kind of in a flurry here, buying eggs. The vegetables are mostly bought out. The whole vegetable section is totally empty. Okay, I'm stocking up on toilet paper, which is kind of a very American thing to do, you know. When we're locked in our house, what's the biggest thing we need? Oh, we gotta buy lots of toilet paper. That seems like very America 2020 coronavirus style. But yeah, I'm buying toilet paper, yogurt, milk, I'm trying to find eggs. I haven't been able to find any eggs. I went to a store and the store was probably only, you know, just a tiny little grocery store, like a little mini mart 7-Eleven type thing. And I probably would have had to wait 40 minutes in line. Every single person had a huge bag of vegetables getting ready to cook inside their house. So crazy times. People are getting ready to be locked in. So while I'm here inside of the grocery store waiting in line, I want to talk a little bit about travel, because obviously we're a travel business on the Tibetan Plateau as Elevated Trips, and obviously no one's traveling this week or next week. Things are just kind of locked down. A lot of flights aren't going. Many flights are canceled. If you do end up traveling, if for some reason you're one of the few places in China that's unaffected, you definitely will need a 48-hour coronavirus test before leaving your city. As you travel, I think China is generally discouraging travel these days and asking people to not leave their cities, to not even leave their apartments. So if you are on the rare case that you are traveling for very important business or something like that, you definitely will need a 48-hour coronavirus test. If you have an asterisk on your green QR code, you're going to need probably a 24-hour coronavirus test. And as long as your QR code is green, like always for the last 2 years, you should be able to travel, should be okay. The danger is if you come to an area where your QR code turns yellow or red, you will have to do possibly a 14 to even 21-day quarantine on one or both ends of your travel. So just make sure wherever you go, your QR code stays green. As soon as that thing turns yellow or red, you are in for some quarantine, which means not fun times locked inside of your apartment. So right now, Shanghai has over 10,000 cases. Okay, that's, for a city of 20 million people in Shanghai, that's compared to the rest of the world, not a lot of cases. But for China, with the zero tolerance policy, that is a lot of cases of COVID. And it's the most cases of COVID since we've seen in Wuhan in spring 2020. So that's the most cases China has seen in the last 2 years. And it's a significant number. It's enough to close almost all of Shanghai down. People are not coming out of their homes in Shanghai for a week, 2 weeks. There's apps telling them how they can calculate their lockdown time. And so it is quite severe. And schools are closing, things are closing. People are not traveling at this time within China, which is a little bit sad for my business, but hopefully China tends to be super fast acting on these things. They tighten controls extremely quickly. They test people. They'll test a city of 20 million people. They'll do over 100 million coronavirus tests in 1 week. And man, they're efficient at it. They're really good at testing millions and millions of people in a short amount of time. Usually they test people 3 to 5 times. Once they've tested, then they tell you you can go out. Okay, a lot of my American friends ask me, they say, hey Ben, don't you think it's a little bit of a strong overreaction to close a city, entirely close a city of 2 million people just for 50 total coronavirus cases, many of which are asymptomatic? And yeah, it's a strong reaction. But I will say in China's defense that they have a population of 1.4 billion people. That's 4 or 5 times the population of America. So imagine if coronavirus were to spread throughout China, their hospital system would be totally overwhelmed. And so I really got to give it to China. Yeah, are they strict on coronavirus? Absolutely. With their zero tolerance policy, it does create some minor inconveniences where things get shut down for a couple days. People sometimes get put in quarantine. It's stricter than almost any other country in the world. But I will say China has done a better job of keeping coronavirus out of its borders, better than almost any other country in the world. Compared to America, with 300 million people, roughly a population of about 300 million people in America, roughly about 1 out of every 300 million people has died in the last 2 years due to coronavirus. That's over 1 million people. Think about 300 people in a room and you pick one of those people out and they are no longer existing, which is super sad. It's a huge fatality rate due to coronavirus and a huge loss for us as Americans. UK and other countries have also similar statistics as far as percentage of population. And so China's done an amazing job keeping the number of coronavirus cases under 70,000 over the whole 2 years for a population of 1.4 billion people. So yes, is it really strict? But considering their population, they've done an amazing job and I really got to hand it to them. At this point, over 90% of China's population is vaccinated. That is a staggering number to think they have vaccinated over 1 billion people in just a year. In the time that they've put out the vaccine, they have made it available and they often make it even free for people, sometimes to the point that a medical hospital RV will even pull up to your apartment complex. All you have to do is walk out, get the shot. They've made it extremely accessible and everyone in the country has buy-in into the vaccine. Okay, we just waited about 2.5 hours in line. You can see all these people behind me. The coronavirus blue tent. They are literally testing everyone inside of our apartment complex. It's probably about, 50,000, 100,000 people in this apartment complex. And they're testing them all in one day. And you can see they're all lined up. Everyone's about 2 meters apart from each other. And we're going to have to do 3 coronavirus tests in the next 3 days, so 1 test per day, which means they're literally going to test 2 million people across our whole city. It's going on across the whole city in every apartment complex. And they're going to test 2 million people 3 times each. And when that is complete and they see no more cases of COVID, they will let us out of our apartment, which means after 6 million coronavirus tests within 3 days, we can exit our apartment. This is how certain they want to be that we are all coronavirus free, just because of 50 cases in Xining. So you can see they're quite serious about the epidemic prevention and control. Okay, I'm going in my house. I won't be leaving this next door for the next 3 days. This reminds me of when we first came back to China around February 28th. We just barely got back in before it totally closed down to all international travel, and we had to do a 14-day quarantine. This is only 3 days, so this is a much shorter version. But yeah, so I'm going to be inside for the next 3 days, watching movies and having dance parties with my kids. So yeah, see you guys later, and subscribe to our channel. This is Ben Cubbage from Elevated Trips at elevatedtrips.com.